stand by. Detractors of Higher Education Minister Dr. Nzimande say his reappointment makes a mockery of the #FeesMustFall movement struggle. But the Council on Higher Education says it's only fair that Nzimande be given another chance. To discuss the debate around the free higher education space and how it's perceived as the Minister himself, Dr. Nzimande. Minister, a very good evening to you and thank you so much for joining us. Very scathing responses by some people, including somebody like Bonginkosi Kanyile, who says it's a relapse of higher education, that you presided over the conditions that led to #FeesMustFall. What's your response to that? Are they being unfair?
Good evening, Tsepiso, to both your viewers and your listeners, and thanks for inviting me. Now, it comes with the territory. Criticism comes with the territory. If you can allow criticism to wear you down, you'll never be able to do anything. It's untrue, completely untrue, you know, that I can be judged as a minister who did nothing. Lots of things that happened whilst I was Minister of Higher Education and Training the first time around. For example, I increased NSFAS tremendously, more than perhaps 3-4 times the first 5 years I was there. I am the minister who introduced NSFAS, National Student Financial Aid Scheme, at TVET colleges, something that was hardly ever there. I built 2 new universities as part of expanding access, new campuses of TVET colleges that were built during my time, focused also on increasing postgraduate studies. And also I was tackling, by the time I stopped, I was tackling the issue of student accommodation, amongst many things.
So we'll talk about
that I did.
We'll talk about some of your accomplishments, Minister.
Yes.
But do you think that there may have been either a misunderstanding or you might have grated each other with various stakeholders? Because Kanyile, for instance, speaks about your posture, and Alex Hotz, for instance, accuses you of incompetence, saying he doesn't understand why you would be reappointed. Do you think that there was a problem in the communication channels with the various stakeholders?
Surely I can't be judged by 2 people.
But just looking at those 2.
I think that there were lots of challenges that we're facing at the time, which are still there, insofar as provision of higher education, especially for the poor, is concerned. We're coming from an extremely low base, but government had actually done a lot since 1994. And I think that it's important that I be judged by what happened during that period. And also maybe we look forward a bit to see what is it that's actually going to be done now and what's going to happen. And I am always available to meet with all the stakeholders. Some of the things that people are raising, for instance, was about students who were arrested during the FeesMustFall, you know, and so on.
I'm glad that you raised that, Minister, because the SRC president at WITS has said that the only reason that students are willing to give you the benefit of the doubt, to feel that you are willing to lend an ear, is if you make concessions, such as ensuring that those who've been arrested are either released or that their sentences are commuted to lesser ones. What do you...
It's not nice to see students being arrested. I said it at the time and I'm still saying it now. But also it's equally not nice when between 2015 and 2017, you have close to 1 billion rands of destruction of university property, including one instance where security police were locked in a room and the room was poured with petrol and set alight. So there had to be defense, protection of life and limb for those who actually committed criminal offenses, because there were criminal offenses that were committed at the time. But as Minister of Higher Education, I have nothing to do with the justice system. In fact, at that time, I had engaged the Minister of Justice, Minister Masuta, about this particular matter. And Minister Masuta came in the media and explained to say that, of course, students have a right to make representations, you know, that they were arrested because they were pursuing a legitimate goal. that opportunity is still open till now, and that's part of the criminal justice system, and that has got nothing to do with the Minister of Education.
I mean, some of this, your critics, and those especially are the fees must fall activists, accuse you of brutality in the manner in which the security forces handled the matter, and they say that came from instructions from you. Do you think that's a function of the brutality of the system, which has led to where students find themselves demanding transformation at a point which government couldn't acquiesce to their demands in the manner that they were asking for?
Tsepiso, I strongly disagree with that. You know, I never instructed anyone to take action against students. All I said to the universities is that it's important that institutions ensure that there is protection of life and there is protection of property. But it was the law enforcement agencies, you know, and in some cases private security that had to actually deal with the destruction of property, as I have said, almost close to R1 billion, banning of libraries and all that. Management needed to take measures, you know, but to say that it was Nzimande who instructed, who was brutal, that's completely incorrect. And by the way, it doesn't even show the complete picture. My reappointment has actually been welcomed by sections of the students' movement, who have, and many other people who are actually role players in the sector who said that they are willing to actually continue to work with me, and I'm looking forward to be working with those people to pursue the agenda of this government to actually expand opportunities, especially for post-school education and training.
It's a good point that you raised, Minister, because in 2017 you said that you believed that you were removed from the position, not only because there were elements within the alliance who were against you being higher education minister, but that they were fueling some of the violent protests. So do you then see this as receiving greater support and greater support for some of the initiatives that you'd already initiated?
Well, I do foresee, you know, I mean, there are many people. There is lots of positivity about my return. I do not want to deny that, you know, and of course there will be people who will actually be critical. I still insist that there were people who were actually fueling this, even within the ranks of my own organization, you know, and my own government.
And that's the SACP?
As what?
As the SACP or within the alliance? When you say within the ranks of my own organization?
Not the SACP, within the ranks of our broad movement. You know, there were people who were fueling this within the alliance, yes. And I hope at some stage, by the way, the truth will emerge.
But for us to understand then what you would be dealing with, what would be the truth? Was it over policy? Was it over the slow pace of transformation and the fact that government was holding back on increasing, for instance, subsidies for universities, ideological differences? What was it?
Look, the struggles of the students were legitimate. There is no doubt about that. I want to say that. There was an impatience to say that we need to move fast to transform the higher education landscape, starting with roads must fall and then to fees must fall. But that does not justify using illegitimate methods, no matter how legitimate the struggle was. So it was important that students, I'm not trying to reduce this to some other bad intentions. The intentions of the students were very good. But the fact of the matter is that beneath that, there were people who were wanting to use that, for instance, to fight the SACP, amongst other things. And some people one day will appear that they were not courageous enough to remove me as president, as minister of higher education and training, and rather working to fuel a legitimate struggle, but that it began to actually take lots of different forms. For instance, Tsepiso, in 2 years' time, it has never happened in the history of South Africa that we have got close to R1 billion of destruction of property. Even at the height of the struggle against apartheid, that never, ever happened, which begins to say that something went wrong, but that must not detract from the legitimate issue that the students were raising. And I'm prepared to work with student formations, all of them now, going forward to actually tackle what still needs to be done in the higher education sector.
So let's talk about what still needs to be done, the issue of accommodation.
Yes.
You have more and more students who are enrolled enrolled within the system, accommodation is still a major struggle. Universities saying they cannot bail out students any more than they have. What is your plan? They're complaining about the decreasing amount of per capita subsidies within the universities.
So around 2011, if I'm not mistaken, 2010 or 2011, one of the first things I did in my first stint in this portfolio was to appoint a ministerial task team, in fact, which was led by Professor Rensberg, who was Vice-Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg at that time, to tell us exactly what's the situation, because I was concerned about the lack of student accommodation. As I say, we're coming from a very low base. Our universities, most of them, were not built for the kinds of numbers and increases that we subsequently had. And I'm willing to admit, I said it at the time, that we grew the system faster than we were able to actually build the infrastructure that was required, especially student accommodation. But from that, government have got plans. For instance, over the next 10 years, we are planning to make available 300,000 beds for universities and 100,000 beds for
But what economic model would you
college.
be using, Minister? Because some of the critics within the academic sphere has said the problem has been that it was based on the 2017 model at the time when it was requisitioned. So do you go back to the drawing board now that you've come back into the portfolio? No,
we're going to build on what we started already, which has been happening. As I say, lots of university beds have actually been added, during, if you count from 2009. And there are plans now to increase quite significantly the amount of beds that are needed, both in the university sector as well as in the TVET college sector. So we are not starting from scratch. And we will be engaging all stakeholders and also welcoming new ideas. Whether maybe we need to go out and borrow huge amounts of money as part of spending in infrastructure in order to be able to address this particular problem.
Is graduate tax still a consideration?
Not of late. It's an issue that was raised for debate, but it sort of went away, especially as we moved on in terms of implementing free higher education for students from the working class and the poor.
So I want to talk about the higher education landscape. You mentioned the fact that it has changed. Technology has also obviously brought that to the fore, but some are suggesting that we're moving towards a point where people won't necessarily have to physically go to universities, as we're seeing now that curriculums are being designed differently, degrees are being designed differently. Are we moving towards that, taking that into account? And also the fact that the age groups are no longer what is predictable. It's no longer just 19 to 25-year-olds that are looking to enroll in degrees.
In fact, the question you are raising is quite fundamental. And the department, even now, under the recent leadership of Minister Pando, that is an issue that we are putting as one of our priorities. Already some universities are experimenting with what they call blended learning. In other words, you go to class, but at the same time you can go back home or go to your room at the university and be able also to access online tutorials, and further notes and so on. That is very important because you are right. If we want to rapidly expand access, we can't use just one method of full-time with a room, with food, but also we have to reach out to adults, people who are working, You can also be looking at evening university classes or college classes in order to expand opportunities. All those are things that we have already started investigating, and as I say, some universities actually begin to experiment around that. We have to increase. With technology also, it's going to be even more possible to be able to have a mix of delivery of programs at both universities and colleges.
Some people are being very cynical, and I'm listening to you talk about the spreading of access. So saying, if we're speaking about the missing middle and how we're going to bring more people into the system, are we saying that it's no longer about academic merit? That are we saying it's about financial standpoint, that this is the kind of higher education environment that we're building? What is your response to that?
No. Tapiso, merit will always be there, In fact, when you raise the issue of merit, the key challenge that we are faced with as a country is to break this pattern that in order to say you are educated and you are accessing post-school. That means going to university. That is why the priority for this country, and also is going to be continue being my priority of the ANC, as part of the ANC government, is to expand college education, especially technical and vocational education and training colleges, so that you actually we're widening and broadening access. Not everyone has to go to university. It's a very tiny percentage, by the way, of students every year who write matric, who go to university. Lots of them, if they are not accepted at university, they sit at home because we still do not have adequate opportunities for them in other post-school institutions like the TVET college sector. We must grow the TVET college sector faster and to be much bigger than the university sector.
So, Minister, there's a discussion now underway about the future of work, and this is something that the President is discussing at the moment at the ILO conference as well. But that's something that also needs to be part of the conversation as you come in as Minister. When the issue was raised about curriculum, if we haven't fully defined it, how are we then going to ensure that we have requisite skills or requisite offerings to the skills that will be required?
Correct. Very important point, Sepiso. And what I'm going to be doing within the next couple of months is to establish a ministerial committee on the Fourth Industrial Revolution and the implications of the Fourth Industrial Revolutions for the kinds of offering that we have in our colleges and universities, so that also we are able to say what kinds of offerings, programs and courses we need to be having going forward. So that's one of the things that is immediately on my agenda, is to establish this ministerial task team. Now I even have a bigger advantage because my department now combines both higher education institutions as well as science and technology, which then gives us a much better platform to be able to respond better to the challenges of the Fourth Industrial Revolution.
Just, Minister, looking at the people who come into the system, I mean, there's concern about, if you look at, for instance, the number of black females or females in general who are taking up some of those studies, and looking at the graduates who are part of the master's studies, that seems to be mostly white male. What are we going to do to change that picture, for instance?
Well, the department had already started a while back, whilst I was still there earlier, to actually focus on increasing and attracting blacks and women into postgraduate studies, so that we can actually be able to produce researchers. We are producing new academics. There is also a program that already exists, by the way, called the New Generation of Academic Program, NGAP, which I introduced in my previous stint, and it's still continuing, where we identify students with talent or inkling to actually become researchers and academics, to be actually drawn into that. Because yes, it is a concern that even now, as some of the people were congratulating me, were just saying there aren't enough black and women South Africans who are taking up academia as a profession. And it's something that it's also on my side. It's very important that we are raising that issue, Tsepiso, because sometimes we tend to look only at undergraduate education at university. Of course, it's important that we expand that. But if students, for instance, are raising issues about decolonization, about transformation of the curricula, we are not going to achieve that unless also we equally pay attention to access to postgraduate and senior degrees, including in particular doctoral degrees, so that we are able to change the demographics, amongst academics and researchers in our country.
Does that mean issues such as blockchain technology, wearable technologies, that we're going to start at a very early stage, that we're not just looking at a high school level, we're starting from primary school level all the way up to tertiary?
Absolutely, that will have to happen. Also, we are fortunate that we have a president who is very passionate about that. I mean, as you were hinting, for instance, he's right now in Geneva giving a report of the commission he co-chairs with the Prime Minister of Sweden on the future of work. And also I must just say that there are certain things also that are being introduced by Minister Motshekga in basic education, which are very important. That is, introducing new streams of vocational and occupationally oriented schooling, particularly in the latter years of schooling, so that we are able to diversify opportunities and the kinds of students that we are able to draw from our from our schooling system. So those are the kinds of changes that we need to strengthen and deepen so that we are able to have an education system that responds to the needs of individuals to begin with, but also to the needs of our economy and the country as a whole.
So, Minister, earlier on we were speaking about politics and how it either interferes or could be found to interfere, especially in higher education. I'm thinking about funding here. And one of the things that has been lamented is the cost of corruption on the country as a whole, but also feeding into higher education. We've seen the Zondo Commission into state capture underway, and some very interesting points coming out of there. The Deputy Chief Justice talking about the possibility of an investigation into whether or not Parliament was not held to account, or whether or not it was derelict in its duty of holding the executive to account. Do you think that that's something that should happen from the Commission perspective? Is that within its purview, looking at the separation of powers?
I've been on record, Tsepiso, as minister and also, by the way, as part of the South African Communist Party, that one of the biggest challenges we face is actually to defeat what is called state capture and corruption. Because if we do not do that, we are not going to do the kinds of things that we need to do in order to create a better life for all our people. So we welcome the fact that things are coming out of all these commissions actually that are there. The Zondo Commission, the Commission on the Public Investment Corp, the Commission on SARS, and other investigations that have actually come out. And even this decision, if it is a decision, I was only hearing about it now from Deputy Chief Justice Zondo to actually probe Parliament, whether Parliament did indeed take adequate measures to prevent the looting and all these things that have been happening.
So as South Africa, support that?
We would support that, absolutely will support that. You remember, by the way, it was the SACP which first called for a commission of inquiry into state capture. So we continue to say, if Parliament needs to be investigated, let it be so, because we must leave no stone unturned in actually tackling this problem.
So let me ask you about another issue, Minister, just to do with the alliance. We've seen a lot of back and forth on the issue around the mandate of the Reserve Bank and how it's been communicated, whether or not there was a popular undertaking by the ANC at the elective Congress about whether or not this should change. Where does the SACP stand now? Should the actual lettering, should the actual wording on the mandate of the Reserve Bank be changed constitutionally, sir?
What we have called for, Tsepiso, is a sober debate and a rational debate. Debate, yes, we must have. That's why we don't agree with the people who are saying don't even debate the issue of the mandate of the Reserve Bank because you're going to negatively affect the markets. We disagree with that kind of thinking. Lots have changed even since we wrote the Constitution. We don't think there's anything wrong with the Constitution on the Reserve Bank. In fact, the Constitution is very clear. It gives the Reserve Bank operational independence, but not policy independence. The Constitution says the Reserve Bank must interact, for instance, with the Minister of Finance insofar as policies are concerned. The ANC resolutions themselves have actually said the mandate of the Reserve Bank needs to be expanded to include tackling the issue of employment, amongst other things. So there's nothing wrong with the Constitution. Even the laws that are there, they might need to be tweaked, some of them, but it's a debate that is actually worth happening. What we are against is for those who may be calling for the revision of the powers of the Reserve Bank because they want to collapse it, like they tried to collapse SARS, like they tried to actually collapse the National Prosecuting Authority. But who are those
people, Minister?
Well, it is known. I don't have to mention names, We are in this trouble that we are in, such that Justice Zondo is calling for this investigation, because we actually allowed people to preside over important institutions who are destroying them, including this very institution we are in, the South African Broadcasting Corporation. So you'd see it as an attempt to
continue looting?
Is what?
You'd see it as an attempt to continue looting?
Some are raising it because it's an attempt to continue looting, so that the Reserve Bank is unable, for instance, to stop outflows of money to places like Dubai. We don't agree with the fact that some people are saying it for that purpose. Neither do we agree with those who actually say there must be no debate about expanding
Minister,
the
I've got
mandate.
to ask you very quickly, final question. The public protector believes that only God can remove her. What is your reaction to that?
No, I don't believe in that. We believe that the public protector needs to act in a manner that is beyond question and beyond reproach. As the SACP, we have concerns that this public protector may have acted in a manner that is actually not consistent with her office. 3 court judgments have already said so. That is why we are saying
Minister,
a parliamentary inquiry is needed.
Thank you very much for your time. Minister of Higher Education, Science and Technology, Dr. Blade Nzimande. This has been The Political View.